Let's go over my StoryGraph reading statistics for the year 2025. I read 137 books, which is almost 20,000 pages and a little over 650 hours. Those are separated out into audio versus digital books. I did not read any paper books. My top mood for books I read were lighthearted, emotional, and funny, which definitely tracks. I also read a decent amount of adventurous and hopeful, some mysterious, then hardly any tense, sad, informative, dark, reflective, inspiring, or challenging. Pace was medium with some fast and almost no slow. I'm not great at slow paced books. I tended to read a lot of short books, so a decent chunk, less than 300 pages, most of them between 300 and 499, and then very few over 500 pages. The audiobooks I read were a good bit shorter. They were almost all less than 8 hours. A decent chunk was between 8 and 16 hours, and then almost none of them were over 16 hours. I read very little nonfiction. Almost everything I read was fiction. And then for my top genres, LGBTQ, romance, contemporary, and sports should really all be combined into one genre because those are probably all the same books. I guess some fantasy LGBTQ in there as well, but mostly lots and lots of romance, lots and lots of queer romance, and then some fantasy as well, and then a smattering of a variety of other genres as well. Tags are things that I created. So most of the like genres and things are generated by the app, but I make my own tags. So rereadable romance are romance books I love. Then there's all kinds of other categories. I really love labeling things. So I enjoy reading books about all different kinds of topics, and I really like being able to categorize them all. It was almost an even split. I listened to a few more books than I read with my eyes, but it was a pretty decent split between audiobooks and ebooks. My most read authors all write romance novels because I will get on a kick and read everything that that author wrote that is available to me from my library. So I went on a huge Emmy Sanders binge. You can see she's the one I read the most of, but I read quite a few from other authors as well. I do highly recommend all of these authors. And all of the books I read were in English because I only speak English. So that is definitely something to work on someday in my life. I want to read a book not in English and actually read it. It may be a Dr. Seuss book, but I want to read a whole book in another language. I really like seeing this statistic: number of books I read, pages I read, and minutes I listened. So it's interesting to see across the different months where I will listen a lot to a book or I will read with my eyes a lot. And the number of books I read is fairly consistent, even if it switches whether I am listening to those books or reading them with my eyes. And then for my star ratings, this almost looks like a bell curve. I do give way too many 5-star reviews. Those there are some books I just love, and I always tell myself I'll use the scale more and give more low rankings, and I still give so many 5-star rankings. The first book I read was Prince and Pawn, which was excellent. I love Tavia Lark books. Strongly recommend that. And the last book was Smash and Grab by Masmatics, which is a comfort read that I go back to whenever I want a nice, lighthearted, fun adventure story. The longest book I read was Wind and Truth, which was 62 hours and 45 minutes. That thing was massive and it desperately needed an editor to make it shorter. And the shortest book I read was Winter Werewolf's Claim by Tavia Lark. My average book length was 307 pages, and it took me 12 days on average to finish a book. The shortest amount of time I spent reading a book was 1 day, and the longest amount of time I spent was 165 days. That was for a self help book. I highly recommend Attached. I felt like I learned a lot from it. These are all the 5-star books I read this year. Lots and lots of romance, a few other things mixed in. It says that my highest ratings were in the month of March and my lowest were in April. And I read the most pages in January. The most popular book I read was The Fourth Wing, and the least popular book I read was 900 Old Ladies, which I highly recommend. That book also had the highest average rating because I think I was one of the only people to rate it. It says that I read 41 new authors and then just picked one book by a new author. And I read 113 books that were part of a series. I reread 10 books, which is good because I want to reread more books. And then I did not finish 17 books. And I'm really proud of that statistic because I read for fun. I read romance novels. There's no reason to make myself read something that I'm not enjoying. So I'm really proud of myself for stopping 17 books that I was not enjoying. And that was my reading for 2025.